Yeah. Welcome back, everybody, to another Purpose Served podcast episode. You already know. It's your legendary host, Darryl Wingfield. I'm back with another one for y'all. If you're new to this podcast is about inspiring you to be the best version of yourself that you could possibly be by innovating and improving the human experience. And on a spiritual level, honoring the two greatest commandments, which is the love yourself, love the Lord your God, my bad, with everything that you have, and to love your neighbor as you love yourself. This episode is inspired by my sister. Denasia, I gotta give you a shout out. This is based on a conversation that I had with her earlier today, on whatever day that you see that this is uploaded. But this is based off of the conversation that we had centered around faith. And it's very, very important that I talk about this due to the fact that we live in age where we are opposed to faith and what faith means, due to the fact that we lean on to things that we can detect with our five senses. So we're going to be talking about faith. You already know at some point it's going to get biblical. It's going to get biblical. And we're going to be talking about the five faculties of the soul. Or five senses. And deep diving into, faith. So I want to start this off by where I'm getting a definition of faith from. And the definition that I'm getting faith from comes from Hebrews chapter 11, verse 1, where it says, "Now faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen." We do not move according to our faith. And it's difficult to move according to our faith if we're using the lenses of this world to ultimately seek and live out our purpose and to live out our calling. Because oftentimes we want everything to be revealed to us in order for us to ultimately know that this is what's best for our life, and this is the journey that we must go on. And for the most part, it will be unclear and dark if you're trying to use the lenses of this world to see what God has in store for you. Oftentimes it's a surprise. It's a mega surprise. So I want to talk about the main person. Well, not the main person, but the first example of this when it comes to walking by faith. And that's Abraham. When Abraham got the call, if y'all are new to this, we've spoken this already, probably a while back. I can't recall when we did. But just to say it for people that probably don't know or never heard the story of Abraham. But Abraham got his call from God at 75 years old. So he received his purpose and his calling at 75 years old, and he was told to separate from essentially everything that he's known up until that point. Family, all of that. Take his wife with him, take his nephew with him, take some of his cattle and all of that good stuff, but he had to go to a land that he's never been before. And out of him was going to come a nation. Out of him, people were going to be blessed because God was blessing them. And if people cursed them, they was going to be receiving curses themselves due to the fact they was going against somebody that God has called. Did he know in its entirety the path that he was walking? No, he didn't. He couldn't see it. That is an act of faith. Also, was very important to understand is that even though it would be unclear to you sometimes at where you're at in your life and what you're doing, don't ruminate on things very deeply, and sometimes you have to take action. Oftentimes, it's very, very subtle to when you receive that calling in your life. And you may not know how big that calling is because the moment can be very, very small. And oftentimes, it can be deeply scary. It can fill you with doubt. And it can fill you with uncertainty. But don't look at any of those things as negative. Because a person that experienced what I just said, when they received their calling and what they should be doing, was Moses. After Moses murdered an Egyptian, he fled away from Egypt. He fled from Egypt and ended up in the wilderness. In his wilderness, this is where he ended up meeting his wife and his father-in-law, Jethro. And while in the wilderness, he ended up being a shepherd for a flock of sheep. And while doing his duties and his purpose at the time, physically, he ended up coming across a cave in Horeb, Mount Sinai. And this is where you get the burning bush encounter in Exodus. And the angel of the Lord was speaking to Moses. And Moses knew that this encounter was of divine providence. And he knew that this was a matter of God's intervention. Moses was told by God that he had to go back to Egypt and free the people and bring them to the exact spot that he was standing on in order for the people to be in remembrance of God and see how real God was in the miracles and the blessing that God had over them and showing that they were God's people. And through an extension of those people resembling the nature of God, that everybody can be grafted into God's family. It wasn't just for the Israelites. And even on that journey, after he accepted the calling, some people that was outside of the Israelites, such as Egyptians, went with them on this journey, this Exodus. But when he was getting his calling and all of that, he had every excuse in the world to not go on a path that he was destined to go. He didn't feel like he was the right person for the job. He didn't feel as though he had the right words for the mission that was set out for him. And another thing that's very important to understand when it comes to walking in faith is that if you lean on your own capabilities and your own knowledge and all of that to walk in your purpose that God has bestowed upon you, you're going to fail and you're going to fall short. That's going to happen regardless, so don't expect it to be a smooth journey and a smooth ride, because that's just not going to be the case. It's not going to be the case. And since physically twofold system, bifarious system, twofold nature to everything when it comes to the experience that we're having. Instead of shepherding a flock of sheep and animals, he was going to be shepherding God's people. And Moses was going to be a representation of a shadow figure of someone in spirit and truth who was that exact thing in its essence, which was not was but is Jesus Christ. And he was going to lead the flock out of Egypt, out of bondage, into freedom. We talked a while back on that transition period of what those people was going through. And it was an act of purification and shedding away that bondage and slave mentality in order to become free. And due to the fact that their hearts were turned towards Egypt, that they was in the wilderness wandering for 40 years because they wasn't ready to receive the promise from God in the land of Canaan. And oftentimes that is true to what we go through. And this was something that they experienced because they was relying more on the five senses, and that being what they can touch, what they can see, what they can hear, what they can smell, what they can taste, quite literally, instead of remaining faithful to their calling. It was hard for them to do that. And that's extremely, still to this day, very relatable. That is very relatable even to this day. How difficult it is to deny your five senses and step into your own essence of your soul and spirit to realize what is the end goal for why you're here. And oftentimes, it's very, very hard to be in communication with your essence. That's essentially your imago Dei, which is the image of God that's implanted in you. Because your body is not the essence of who you are, but your body is simply a vessel that houses your essence. And your body is simply, going back to the shadow versus the real thing, your body is the shadow of your soul, and your soul is the real imprint of who you are and forms your body. And your soul body comes from your spirit body, and your spirit body comes from the Spirit of God. Not to get real deep on here, but just like scratching the surface of what the point I'm trying to convey, and I'm pronouncing this wrong. In the Philokalia, Volume 5, which is, if you are watching the video, it's that yellowish book that's on the top shelf. There's a section in there called On the Life of Stillness and the Monastic State, 100 texts. And in the text 69, it talks about, this is the title, on the five faculties of the soul, on forms of imagination that pertain to the soul and those that pertain to the intellect, on how pure prayer, and when the intellect's activity is simple or one-pointed, we must shun completely all imaginative forms, all figurations, representations, and appearances. And these are the five faculties of the soul that they mention. The first one is the intellect. The second one is reason. The third one is supposition. The fourth one is imagination. And the fifth one is senses. the best place to move from the five faculties of the soul is the intellect. And the intellect shouldn't be confused with worldly intellect, of what your brain knows and all of that good stuff. But the intellect is raised to the knowledge of spirit. Just to put in the context of what I'm talking about, remember the 3 degrees of knowledge that I constantly mention on here, that comes from one of the holy fathers, one of the desert fathers, Saint Isaac the Syrian, in a 52nd homily, which is on the teachings of the first degree of knowledge of the body, second degree knowledge on the soul, and the third degree of the spirit. And the intellect, from the sense of the God, it comes from the spirit of God. And for the most part, if you're using your 5 senses in order to interpret what's going on around you, you ultimately will be blinded, like I said, to the truth. Your true calling and what God is moving you towards. It's going to be dark regardless. And the only reason why it's going to be dark for you is because you're first aligned into a different set of eyes and a different set of vision of the uncreated light versus the light that is created but ultimately is a shadow of what really is. And it's dark in its nature. And the intellect, like I said, is number 1, but notice the 5th faculty of the soul that I said is the senses. So just for you guys, just to run it back, if you guys want to write some of this stuff down and look it up in your free time, I think that it would be very, very edifying for your spirit to look into this. Is intellect being number 1, reason being number 2, 3 being supposition, 4 being imagination, and 5 being the senses. And the 5 senses can be associated with the body, the first degree of knowledge. And the journey is to be traveled inward. If you're seeking the kingdom of heaven and the kingdom of God, the journey is traveled inward. But at the same time, that don't mean you sit around and you do nothing. You still have to carry out on the calling, and it's different for every single person. Everybody is unique in their own capacity, and everybody is authentic in their own capacity. But you have to take action. If you keep imagining what you must do, and like I said, keep ruminating over what you must do, time is going to pass. And ultimately, if you get stuck in that, that is necessarily not God that got a hold of you and that you're moving through. But it's the opposing nature to God. And the opposing nature to God is the evil one. That got a hold of your imagination. That's filling you with images of things that's not real. And that's keeping you in one spot and leading you to procrastinate instead of taking action. You must move even when you're filled with doubt and fear and uncertainty, and have faith. And have faith. Because God will reward you on your faith. Chapter 11 in Hebrews is like very important. I also want to read to you guys what it says further on in that same chapter in 11. And it says that in verse 8, by faith Abraham, when he was called to go out into a place which he should after receive for an inheritance, obeyed. And he went out, not knowing whither he went. By faith he sojourned in the land of promise, as in a strange country, dwelling in tabernacles like tents, with Isaac and Jacob, the heirs with him of the promise. So the promise got passed on to the generations following after, and that promise still lives on with us to this very day. It didn't stop. It did not stop. And you got to be led by the Spirit, and you got to be led by the truth. Ultimately, what I've been speaking to you guys on. And going back to that conversation that I had with my sister, I asked her, what is the truth? What is the truth? Is the truth subjective, or is the truth objective in its nature? And the truth can only be found in God. And God is the truth. And if you think that you can find the truth outside of God, there's something in you that's living a lie in the false nature of who you truly are and truly meant to be, and where your purpose lie in this world, and where your purpose lie within yourself. And from falling victim to one of the faculties of the soul, which is the imagination, it's going to lead to lofty ideas. It's going to lead to abstractions. It's going to lead you to be idle in your head. And ultimately, that's going to fuel the procrastination. Like bad. It's going to fuel it. So, I want to bring up, as I always do, Christ. And I told you guys the representation that he's had in history, but just his spirit as well. And there's a twofold nature to everything. To everything. I just spoke on Moses being a shepherd for a flock that ended up being a shepherd for the people. And he was the shadow figure of Christ, who is the shepherd for the sheep on the right side when the separation starts to happen. Well, it's already happening. But he's going to have his sheep on the right-hand side, and he's going to put the goats on the left-hand side. And I'll tell you what, people, you don't want to find yourself on the left-hand side. You want to find yourself on the right-hand side. But there was a teaching that he was doing and talking to the people. And I believe he was on the Sea of Galilee, where you see that Peter, Andrew's brother, John and James, who are all fishermen, get their calling. And they were struggling to get fish. And Jesus hops into their boat and he tells them to go out while he does his teaching. And there was a miracle that was about to take place. And he tells them to cast their nets out. And they ended up catching so many fish that the boat was about to overturn. And then this is where the calling happens. He tells them, instead of being fishers as they were, their occupation was going to change spiritually. And they was going to be fishers of men. And they left everything to follow Christ and be disciples of Christ. Not knowing where it was going to lead them. And all of them fell short along the way. But they stayed the course. And they kept fighting a good fight until the very end. And the one thing that I keep encouraging you guys to do is fight the good fight until the very end. And it's not easy. But don't be ruled by your emotions and don't be ruled by your thoughts. That's going to hinder you from walking in your true purpose and your true calling in life. Don't listen to the doubt. Know that it's there. Observe that it's there. Don't listen to the fear. Know that it's there and observe that is there. Have faith, and you're going to be tried. You're going to face a whole lot. You're going to face a whole lot of trials, tribulations, and temptations along the way. But you must stay the course. And the twofold nature within staying the course, once you move on your calling naturally, like I always tell you guys, is not only going to be helpful for you, but it's going to be helpful for the people around you. And your calling is the means to your end at the same exact time. Just like within a seed that comes from a tree, its essence is already built into it. The fruit is already built into it. Even though the season hasn't come for it to be ripe, it's still there. But it has to be nurtured and put in a certain environment in order for it to come into fruition. Action must take place. You can't just sit around and do nothing. And like I said not too long ago, that the times that we live in now, in modern day, it opposes what faith actually means. Because if people do not get physical proof of something, they can't believe it. Because they're going based off of a lens of this world instead of basing a lens off of their soul and their essence and their spirit. And it distracts them. It lulls them to sleep. And people know genuinely deep down inside, they can put on the front and they can put on the facade, but they know something's off. A lot of them can't sense what. Is because they're blinded to themselves. They're blinded to themselves. Now, for a majority of people, there will be a time period when you're going through, when you get this calling of you being alone. Even though you could be amongst other people. This is something that I was speaking to somebody on today and like 2 weeks ago. And the fact of once you start waking up to the truth that you're going to be visible in an invisible way. Where you're going to start noticing things about the world. You're going to start noticing how wicked the world is and how evil the world is. But you're also going to start noticing how people don't see you for who you truly are. And they never did. And while all of this is going on, there's something else that's going to be happening around you. Once you start waking up to this truth and God starts opening your eyes and clearing them up, your friends is going to start to disappear out of nowhere. And your family is going to start to disappear out of nowhere. Your friends is going to start to oppose you. And your family is going to start to oppose you. And things are going to break down. They're going to break down. Abraham experienced this. Moses experienced this. Jesus experienced this. Abraham, at some point, had to depart from his nephew Lot due to the fact that they was having differences themselves, and that was based off of the accumulation of wealth that they was having between their livestock, land, and all of that, and they ended up going their separate ways. Moses was dealing with a whole nation of people that was grumbling and mumbling and trying to come against them, and did not trust what he was doing and didn't have faith in what they were being led to. And ultimately they thought that he was leading them to death, and that wasn't the case. And not to mention, of course, Christ, who showed the way and ultimately knew why he was here And that was to pay the ultimate tab for people's ignorance and wrongdoing due to the fact they couldn't see. And the most beautiful thing about Jesus, for example, with a lot of his teachings, he taught in parables. He taught in parables because that would be a way for people to be filtered through, essentially speaking. And if he talked directly about spiritual matters, people wouldn't get it because their intellect was more so associated with the world instead of their intellect being of the spirit. And those with eyes, they could see. Those with ears, they could hear. But a lot of people, for the most part, were blind in spirit and deaf in spirit. So they couldn't detect the truth. And don't be one of those people now, because due to the fact that the darkness is accumulating and growing, a lot of people are blind and deaf to the spirit of truth, which only comes from God. Anything with your identity outside of that, it's not really who you are. It's who you think you are. It's not really your essence, and it's what you think that you must do because you are holding other people's opinion about you in a higher standard and a higher regard than the creator that created all things. Walk in the light of your purpose. And there, you will be making a huge difference in the world. You will be making a huge difference in your personal life and in your soul and in your spirit. And it's going to be dark at first, and it's going to take for your soul senses to understand what you are experiencing. But know that your body and everything that's outside of that is a shadow of what really is. And what really is lies within you. And yet again, that's what the kingdom of heaven is. That's what the kingdom of God is. So, that's what I wanted to talk to you guys about. Walk in faith and not by sight. Walk in faith and not by sight. And put your faith in the ages of all ages that's going to come in the sanctified day. It will come. And you must live in it every single day. You don't live in it in yesterday. You don't live in it in tomorrow because it's not real. Yesterday and tomorrow is not real. Today is, though. This moment is, though. That's all you have. And that's all you need. Yeah, like I always tell you guys, be present and let tomorrow worry about itself. Sufficient is the day. Is his own trouble. Be present, people. Until next time, serve your purpose. I'm out of here.